Hi, I'm Greg. Welcome to Affect Studio. I'm here to compare 11 12-inch speakers in a Deluxe Reverb. I've used the Deluxe cab for general speaker comparisons before, where they were driven by an amp with switchable output impedance, but never actually compared speakers in a Deluxe cab when driven by the Deluxe Reverb amp. In recent years, I've realised that comparing a group of speakers will give you an idea of how they differ, but you really need to make comparisons with the same type of amp and cab the speakers will be used in. I've found situations where a speaker that sounded great in one amp didn't sound good in another. I'm using 8-ohm speakers I have on hand. 7 of these speakers are still in production, 3 are out of production but relatively common, and 1 hasn't been made for over 50 years, although you can still find them. Here's the first clip, the neck pickup on my Strat with fairly low output pickups into the amp on full. As always, the same DI'd guitar part being fed through my reamp box into the amp, so the only variable is the speaker. Only processing is attempting to level match the clips so that the volume differences don't skewer our perception. I've decided not to reveal the speakers yet so we aren't influenced by our biases or expectations. I was surprised by some of them. For speakers, I have an Oxford 12M611 out of my 64 Bassman, which I did think was the same speaker used in the original Black Panel Deluxe and Deluxe Reverb, but seems to be a slightly more powerful speaker, so not exactly the same. They haven't been in production for at least 50 years, although researching them I saw a few for sale. The good thing with quality speakers, of course, is they last for decades if looked after. I have 7 speakers of varying age that are still in production: Eminence 1258 and Cannabis Rex, Celestians with a G12M 25 greenback, G12H30, G12H75 creamback, Alnico Gold and Alnico Blue. Try the blue at your own risk. I've heard that the originals were conservatively rated, and these are supposed to be made the same way, but it's obviously a risk using an expensive 15-watt speaker in an amp that produces 22 watts clean. My guitar teacher melted the voice coil in a 35-watt Celestion after using it for years with a 40-watt Fender. I've discontinued model Celestians that are fairly easy to find. G12M70 used in lots of Marshalls prior to the introduction of the 75 watt version, G12L35, which was also used in a lot of amps. It isn't a speaker I would have thought to try, but the guy I bought it from mentioned having one in his Deluxe Reverb. My teacher used one in his early 60s Brown Vibrolux until it caught fire, and it had always sounded great up to that point, so I thought I'd include it. Same with the G1230, which I thought was less common until I did a search and found a few of them for sale. Next clip is using my 50s style Tele with some chorus and delay. This Deluxe is another amp I built with a mate. He built the cab and I built the amp. Tagboard construction, so if maintained it should be around forever. When we built it, we discussed making it not look the same as any production model Fender, so it wasn't an exact copy. Sometime later we noticed Fender started producing amps using the same colour scheme. Oh well, good taste. It became the amp used in the studio more than any other in the last 18 or so years since we built it. There were a couple of producer engineers who worked here for a while and got all the bands they produced to at least try it. I think they pretty much all used it at some point. No surprise, as the Deluxe and Deluxe Reverb have always been great sounding amps. As sound reinforcement has improved, they're as loud as most people will ever need too. Next clip is my SG through a peanut butter Model T drive with some delay into the amp on full, same settings as I use with my Strat. I originally had a Weber silver bell on this amp and replaced it with a Celestian gold. I don't recall the Weber sounding bad, and I think I may have done that after comparing the speakers with a different setup. About 5 years ago I wanted to try the gold in my Marshall Astoria, so put the green back in the Deluxe, where it stayed until I needed it for the AC30 comparison the other day. I then thought I should listen to a few of them before putting one back in permanently. For the normal channel of this amp, I used the same circuit as the early 60s mid-powered Brownface Fenders, like the Vibrolux or normal channel on my Bassman. They use a tap treble pot where it's actually flat at 12 o'clock. There's a fourth lug on the pot which is the tap. The tone usually sounds a little grittier than the black panel circuits. This is a Brownface circuit using my Les Paul Special. I hadn't planned to use reverb for this clip, so the end gets cut off a little each time, so I've done a quick fade. Good, you're still here. What did you hear? Were there any that surprised you? Ones you loved or really didn't like? Leave a comment. Having done a few speaker comparisons, I found that people's tastes vary quite a lot, which is part of what keeps all this interesting. If we all used the same gear and liked the exact same tones, things could get a bit boring. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon on the drop-down menu when you subscribe so you get notified when I make some more of these, and I'll see you next time.